You ever seen someone act so entitled, they practically write their own arrest warrant? That's exactly what happened in our lakeside community, and I still can't believe how fast it all unraveled. It all started with a sand garden. Yes, sand. Not a drug bust or a land dispute or some secret illegal activity, just a woman so obsessed with control. She thought she could siphon sand from a federally protected riverbed and get away with it. Karen had always been a thorn in everyone's side. She wasn't just your average overbearing neighbor. No, she was the HOA president, the self-crowned ruler of our peaceful little subdivision. If your grass grew half an inch too high, you'd hear from her. Leave your trash bin out 5 minutes. Past pickup. Expect a written warning. She once fined a retired veteran $200 for flying a flag outside of designated patriotic holidays, claiming it disrupted the visual harmony of the neighborhood. The guy had served 2 tours overseas, but Karen didn't care. In her mind, the rules were rules as long as she was the one writing them. So when she started talking about building a Zen garden in her backyard, we all braced for the storm. It was all she could talk about for a month. Real white sand, she said, waving around Pinterest photos of minimalist Japanese courtyards. It'll bring peace and serenity to the whole block, she claimed, conveniently ignoring the fact that she was the single biggest source of stress in the entire zip code. She tried to make it an HOA-funded project at first, arguing it would be a shared spiritual space. We all voted no. She pouted for a week but didn't push it further, or so we thought. Then, early on a Saturday morning, I heard the unmistakable rumble of heavy machinery echoing across the still lake. Curious and slightly suspicious, I walked to my backyard fence and saw it. A dump truck idling on Karen's lawn and a mini excavator crawling toward the waterline. Behind her property runs a narrow but beautiful river, bordered by reeds and nesting birds. The whole thing is protected by state and federal conservation laws. There's a reason nobody's ever tried to build so much as a kayak rack down there. But Karen, she had her crew digging directly into the riverbed, scooping out sand and sucking up water with some industrial-grade vacuum pump. One guy was neat in the water with a hose, slurping up what looked like whole buckets of sediment. I could feel my stomach knotting just watching it. I walked over to the edge of my yard, flagged one of the workers down, and asked who they were. He gave me a shrug and said, "She hired us for some backyard work, told us to suck up as much sand as we could fit." I asked if they had a permit. He looked at me like I was speaking Martian. Karen saw me talking to them and strutted down, in her wedge heels like she was directing a Hollywood production. "Don't worry about it," she said, all smiles. "Just cleaning up my side of the river. It's unsightly, don't you think?" I told her, flat out, that the riverbed was protected, that what she was doing was illegal. She rolled her eyes and said, "Oh please, it's just a little sand, and it's technically behind my property line, so it's not like anyone owns it." That was the moment I realized she truly had no idea how deep the hole she was digging, literally and metaphorically, was going to get. I went back to my house and started snapping photos. Her backyard looked like a construction zone. Mud everywhere, birds scattering, sand being loaded into the truck like it was topsoil. I didn't want to get involved, but I knew someone had to say something. I'd lived here 10 years and never once seen anyone touch that river. It's not just about the sand, it's the ecosystem. The reeds, the turtles, the birds that nest every spring. Karen didn't care. She wanted her Pinterest-perfect garden and was willing to bulldoze a slice of nature to get it. I called the local environmental authority and left an anonymous report. I wasn't expecting anything dramatic, maybe a citation, a fine, something minor, but within 24 hours, everything changed. That Sunday afternoon, our sleepy cul-de-sac turned into a scene straight from a crime drama. 2 black SUVs pulled in first, followed by a white government-issued pickup. The doors swung open, and out stepped 4 federal agents wearing dark jackets with the words U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service * printed on the back. They didn't look like they were here for a chat. One had a briefcase. Another carried a folder, as thick as a phone book. Karen was pruning her hydrangeas when they walked straight up her driveway and handed her a cease and desist notice. She blinked, utterly confused. "This must be a mistake," she said, already pulling out that sickly sweet Karen voice that had conned so many board members into submission. "I'm the HOA president." One agent replied flatly, "Ma'am, this isn't an HOA matter. You violated multiple federal environmental regulations. We're here under the authority of the Clean Water Act." You should have seen the color drain from her face. Her mouth opened, then closed. She looked around like someone had hit pause on her universe. The agent started asking questions. Did she authorize the removal? Did she know this was a protected wetland? Did she have any permits? Karen stammered, trying to deflect responsibility. I hired a contractor. I thought they handled all that, but the agent already knew everything. They had satellite images, they had documentation from conservation drones, they even had time-stamped video footage from the river monitoring system. That stretch of river was part of a monitored wildlife corridor, home to several protected bird species and migratory nests. By removing the sand and disturbing the habitat, Karen had tripped at least 3 separate violations. They started snapping pictures of her backyard, marking off the edges with orange flagging tape. They measured the disturbed area. She tried to argue, but nobody was listening anymore. I stood at my window, watching it all unfold. I wanted to feel bad, I really did, but all I could think about was how many people she'd bullied over garbage bins and mailboxes, how many neighbors she'd humiliated over nonsense rules. And now, here she was, cornered in her own backyard, caught red-handed by federal agents over something as ridiculous as sand. It was poetic justice, no better. It was the beginning of something none of us would ever forget. Karen stood in the middle of her backyard like a statue, clutching that cease and desist notice as if holding it tighter would make it go away. Her carefully styled hair was being tousled by the breeze, but she didn't even fix it. For once she had no words, no snide remarks, no smug authority, just silence. The federal agents were already walking the perimeter of the mess she'd made, marking off sections of disturbed land with orange tape, snapping photos with wide-angle lenses, and pointing toward the riverbed with quiet urgency. She tried to follow one of them, still hoping to charm her way out. I didn't realize the area was federally monitored, she stammered. This is my private property. I thought I could maintain it, for safety. The agent didn't even look up from his clipboard. Ma'am, the area behind your retaining wall is federal conservation land. That includes the riverbed and shoreline. You've removed approximately 12 cubic yards of natural sediment. You violated the Clean Water Act, and possibly the Migratory Bird Treaty Act, depending on what was nesting here. Karen's mouth opened again, but nothing came out. Behind her, the once pristine vision of her backyard Zen garden was a disaster zone. Piles of moist grayish-white sand were dumped haphazardly where her roses used to be. A low-lying area near her deck was starting to pool water because apparently, when you remove natural drainage features and try to play landscaper without knowing what you're doing, things go south fast. One of the neighbors, Brenda 2 houses down, whispered to me over the fence, "Is this real? Are those actual federal agents?" I nodded. "Yup, fish and wildlife." She tore up a protected riverbed. Brenda gasped. "She's always so smug. Remember when she made me repaint my mailbox twice because it wasn't neighborhood gray?" We both couldn't help but watch the show. The whole street could. Word had spread like wildfire in the neighborhood group chat. Within minutes, a few more neighbors were peeking from behind their fences and windows, pretending to garden while clearly soaking in every second. Karen's contractor, the one who brought the truck and excavator, never showed back up. He'd apparently been paid in cash, no contract, and was already gone before the agents arrived. One of the feds asked her for the name and business license of the crew. She gave them a name and a number, which turned out to be disconnected. Another violation: no licensed contractor, no official invoices, no paperwork whatsoever. When you cut corners that aggressively, the truth doesn't just catch up, it slaps you in the face. Later that evening, the agents finished cataloging the damage. They left, but not before posting a second notice on her front door this time. From the State Department of Environmental Quality. Karen didn't come out for the rest of the day. Her backyard sat in silence, the orange tape fluttering in the wind like crime scene markers. Monday morning, the storm officially began. She got her first fine, $25,000 from the feds for unauthorized dredging, then another $10,000 per day until the damage was fully mitigated. That didn't include the cost of the ecological restoration work the state would now demand, which, from what I overheard, could exceed $100,000 depending on the impact to the wildlife. The worst part, her property now had a federal lien until the penalties were resolved. No selling, no refinancing, no escape. The HOA had an emergency meeting that evening. Karen, somehow still clinging to the last scraps of authority, called it herself. She stood at the head of the clubhouse like a drowning queen, insisting that this was all a misunderstanding, that she had acted in good faith to beautify the neighborhood, that the contractors had misled her about what was allowed. She even tried to blame the river for creeping into her property over the years. Nobody bought it. Jason from Lot 12 raised his hand and said, "So let me get this straight. You illegally excavated a protected habitat with an unlicensed crew, caused damage that's going to take a year to fix. And now the whole community has federal agents crawling around because you wanted pretty sand. A few people chuckled. Someone else added, "You didn't just mess up your yard, Karen, you've embarrassed the entire HOA. Brenda stood up next and said, "And you once told me my begonias were too loud." Karen tried to defend herself again, but the motion to remove her as HOA president was already circulating. It passed unanimously. The aftermath dragged on for weeks. Environmental crews in marked vests showed up with equipment, measuring water runoff, checking soil samples, replanting native reeds. They even installed temporary fencing to keep animals from wandering into the damaged area. The whole thing became a mini spectacle. Kids on their way to school would slow down and gawk. Neighbors took photos. Someone even created a meme of Karen standing in front of her backyard with a caption, asterisk, "When you think you own nature, but nature calls the feds." Asterisk. As for the Zen garden, it turned into a shallow swamp. The sand she had stolen started clumping and growing algae within days. Mosquitoes bred in the standing water. She tried to shovel it into piles, but it just made things worse. At one point she tried to spread mulch over it, thinking it would hide the mess. It didn't. It smelled awful. The whole yard looked like a failed science experiment. She stopped showing her face around the neighborhood. Her once weekly HOA patrols disappeared. Her decorative flags swapped out seasonally with perfect timing stayed down. People speculated she might be moving, and sure enough, a "for sale by owner" sign popped up in her yard. Rumor had it for buyers backed out once they found out about the federal lien. One even called the environmental agency directly, who told them flat out that property is under ongoing investigation for ecological damage. Karen, the iron-fisted ruler of our HOA, was now trapped by the very land she tried to dominate. Her castle, once pristine and micromanaged to perfection, had become a cautionary tale, nature's revenge in the most poetic form. Her obsession with control, with appearances, with making everything look exactly the way she wanted, had turned into her undoing. And that's how our neighborhood found peace, not from a Zen garden, but from watching Karma arrive in a black SUV and walk up her driveway wearing a federal badge.